And I'm going to take you to Bristol, because it is in Bristol that the local newspaper has elected to publish some of the worst abuse and threats directed at the teenage environmental activist Greta Thunberg. I have not succeeded, I'm afraid, in coming to any nuanced or sophisticated analysis of why this young woman, who subscribes to precisely the same worldview as David Attenborough, for example, excites such vile responses from people who mostly, one has to presume, because the alternative is too dismal to contemplate. They must know better. The massive majority of them must be better than this. But something happens in the crucible of social media and what I suppose you can only describe as a sort of virtual lynch mob mentality. But it hurts, clearly. You know, I mean, the number of people talking now about the suffering that they endure as a result of being abused online is, for the grimmest of reasons, growing. And I think we all need to pay attention to this. The funniest fella, perhaps, outed by Bristol Live, is the one that's got "Be Kind" on his Facebook profile, something that was encouraged in the aftermath of Caroline Flack's passing. So what they've done is essentially pick a few of the choicest examples of people being performatively vile on their own Facebook page and publish them. And I just want to know what you think about that. Because at the moment, I'm not necessarily going to give you the names of what people have said. I don't know, because I can't do a phone. It'd be a bit like saying, you know, like we've sometimes fallen into the trap of saying, oh, should this be shown? Head over to lbc.co.uk and have a look. For the avoidance of doubt, there is absolutely no grounds ever for suggesting that one single reason lies behind anybody's decision to take their own life, whether they're in the public eye or not. It's something that Ofcom and indeed the Samaritans, much more importantly for my conscience and purposes with you every day, are adamant about. It is deeply irresponsible and dangerous to attribute a suicide to a single factor. So for the avoidance of any doubt, don't do that, and don't think that I am either. But I can't say to you, how do we feel about publishing the names of these people, and then hit the names of these people before we've decided how we feel about it. So although I think, warm towards the idea, I think I'm in favour of it, because it seems to me that people aren't going to wake up to the impacts of their own conduct unaided. I'm also obviously minded to point out that the worst people are generally anonymous. So in a sense, would naming and shaming people like this simply prompt them to be anonymous next time, and even more vile than they are already? And I suppose it also has to be said that some of the bile directed at this young woman is not a million miles away from what you can read in your newspaper columns or hear on the radio. But here is one example. Can someone grab her pigtails and Miss Trunchable her over the fence? I think that's a reference, misspelt reference to Miss Trunchbull out of Roald Dahl's Matilda. And this character also claimed she was a product of AntiFur Parents. For those of you who are not familiar with the darker corners of the internet, anti-fa is a sort of word used usually by fascist sympathisers, although I'm sure that's not the case in this case, to describe people who are opponents of fascism. Now, as with any gathering of people behind a cause, there'll always be a couple of bad apples in the barrel. So sometimes, perhaps, people turn up under a anti-fascist banner looking for a fight with some fascists, which is not helpful, you know. But of course, in the lazy, performative, hate-filled environment that has been created in America and the UK in particular by the rise of politicians like Donald Trump, being opposed to fascism is now, as this Facebook post would attest, being sold to the credulous and the gullible as somehow a bad thing. So where do you stand on fascism? I'm very anti it. Oh, down with that sort of thing. What? So he also adds that. Seems lovely, doesn't he? And we've got other examples. Again, at the moment, I'm not going to say the name. This character says she should be burnt at the stake. Now, He's gone on to the Bristol Live Facebook page and under his own name has written that. Now, oddly, I took legal advice a few years ago on whether I could actually sue people on LBC's own Facebook page for libel, and it turns out I could have done. And I toyed with the idea because my kids need shoes, and it would have been a wonderful payday to just go through them all one by one. And anyone who sort of says terrorist sympathiser, because I don't think that Muslims who aren't terrorists should be attacked. Anybody who is a terrorist obviously should be condemned in the strongest of terms and locked up for the foreseeable. But these bears of very little brain don't quite understand that. But I didn't even read their names out on this show because I think there's a danger sometimes of feeding the trolls, so to speak, if you see what I mean. But then again, do you think that this character here, calling for a 17-year-old girl to be burnt at the stake because she espouses the same science as David Attenborough, do you think that seeing his name in print is going to have made him feel bigger and better? Or is it going to have crushed him? Because if it's crushed him, is this a healthy thing to do? This chap defends himself. She should be burnt at the stake. The fellow who's got "Be Kind" on his Facebook profile went for the rather milder, perhaps, milkshakes at the ready, which of course is a reference to the habit of throwing milkshakes at people that became popularised last year. It puts the "Be Kind" filter that he's added to his Facebook profile into perhaps a rather new light. And we've got another one saying "crush the," and then a word beginning with "B" that ordinarily applies to a female dog. "Crush the bee, sounds good to me, send her home." And if you're wondering why I'm reading them out, it's because I think that will inform your answer to my question. I think if I asked you in the abstract, then you'd come up with one answer. But if I ask you in the specific, I think it might prompt you to come up with a different answer. Send her back the way she should be, in flat pack, as that's what Sweden is famous for. So you read that and you find yourself thinking, yeah, actually, I think I probably am going to read out all your names before the end of the programme. Here's another one who boasts on his Facebook profile of being the father to young children. Her parents need to slap her with a brick. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I haven't yet found someone obnoxious towards Greta Thunberg who wasn't also in favour of Brexit. But I do think that this kind of performative obnoxiousness has got much, much worse since June of 2016. And presumably the Bristol Live journalist could have carried on indefinitely looking for this sort of thing. Here's someone suggesting that we should deploy water cannon, which presumably he's not aware of the fact that that's illegal, even for the police to use in Britain, to attack children attending the rally in Bristol on College Green. Yeah, he's a lovely bloke, this one. He says, I drive a diesel car. I also love flying around the world, and I also love a good coal fire, so I am doing something to help the planet. God help us all. I expect I caused the coronavirus as well. I'd file that under forgivable, actually. All of that seems reasonable to me. But this one, if I had a chance, I would borrow a fire engine and spray the lot of the morons with water cannon. The people are turning on these theses morons. Read all the comments on here. And that's what I meant by the madness of crowds. Read all the comments on here, says somebody being utterly obnoxious about children. Because it emboldens him. It makes him think, well, yeah, all right, I used to be a little bit ashamed of my deepest, darkest thoughts. But now I've got 463 likes for them on Facebook. And look, everybody else is just as vile as I am. You know, when it came home for me with a vengeance was in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, when people seemed to be competing on some social media sites to be as vile as possible about the dead, culminating, of course, in a senior member of the government, Jacob Rees-Mogg, sitting in this studio and insulting the memories of people who had burned to death in their own homes. So it starts off, that's why I worry that it is a little bit more serious than the usual dismissive, it's only Facebook allows. It was on Facebook in the immediate aftermath of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, but where does someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg get the idea that it would be all right to insult the memories of people who burned to death in their own homes by maligning their intelligence or their common sense? Where does he get the idea? Does that arrive fully formed and completely new and unprompted in his skull? Or is he a product of the environment that's created when people compete on social media to be as disgusting as they can about dead children? Thank God the people in Bristol are only being disgusting about children who are still alive. But again, that question of why would espousing the same science that David Attenborough believes in prompt such outpourings of viciousness and bigotry towards a 17-year-old woman, while David Attenborough is still regarded as a national treasure? Yeah, riddle me that.